is there with Lawson Naidoo from the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution. Over to you, Manelisi.
Thank you very much, Nzinga. And as my colleague Adrian has just said, this ruling again today has put the spotlight back into this institution, not for the first time. You'll recall that in the Nkandla case, Parliament was also found wanting. And that's the issue we want to just concentrate on for a moment, myself here and my guest, Mr. Lawson Naidoo. Mr. Naidoo, this ruling today, what does it say about this institution, about the trust in this institution?
Well, I think it's a damning indictment on Parliament as, one of the key institutional features of our democracy, that Parliament has once again been found to have failed to fulfill its constitutional obligations. The court described today's case as a sequel to the Nkandla case that the ConCourt ruled on in March of 2016. In that case, we know that the court found that Parliament had failed to hold the President to account. 18 months later, the court is making a similar ruling that the Parliament has still failed to hold the President to account, has still failed to put in place proper mechanisms to do so. So I think this is, it's an indictment on Parliament, and Parliament really needs to reflect on this. And I think there were strong words from the majority judgment saying that Parliament must now do this without delay, that there must be a sense of urgency, because essentially Parliament ignored the Nkandla judgment, did nothing in terms of reflection and saying, how can we improve our processes to ensure that we don't find ourselves in that position again? They failed to do that.
Doesn't that now amount to, the fact that they ignore these court rulings, to the contempt of court itself?
Well, I think, today's ruling is tantamount to Parliament being in contempt of court, because the Nkandla judgment is there. It's very clear. And Parliament failed to do anything following that. The court pointed out, yes, there were question and answer sessions with the President. There were motions of no confidence that were debated in the House. But they're saying that in terms of this provision in Section 89, providing for impeachment, Parliament does not have a process in place to deal with that. And that's a failure that exists, and I think this is where the issue of the separation of powers comes in. So what the court said today is they didn't say to Parliament how that process what that process should look like, but simply saying to Parliament, you need to craft that process and put that process in place. And I think, reference was made to the proposal from the EFF that there be 3 retired judges and so on. I'm not sure whether that's the right way to go. But I think what is probably envisaged here is a quasi or a semi-judicial process, because one has to get to the bottom of what does the Constitution mean when it says a serious violation of the Constitution or the law or serious misconduct. And that's not defined either in the Constitution and was not really dealt with by the court today in deference to Parliament.
But Mr. Naidoo, just help us here. Does the rules of Parliament, given the separation of powers, does they have to comply or to abide by the Constitution or to be in line with the Constitution?
Well, the Parliament derives its powers directly from the Constitution, and the Constitution says that the National Assembly has the right to make rules regarding the conduct of its business. And those rules must, of course, be consistent with our constitutional principles and values of openness, transparency, and accountability. And accountability is the key issue here, which is what this judgment is really all about, is how does Parliament exercise its power effectively to hold the President to account. So Parliament must make those rules in accordance with the Constitution, and that's why the court was careful. So I think the issue around judicial overreach, it's never clear where that line is to be drawn. And as we heard, Chief Justice Mokoeng, in a dissenting judgment, drew the line in a different place to where the majority drew that line. So this is obviously, but I think the court, I would agree with the decision of the majority that they're saying to Parliament, you failed to do it. They're not saying to Parliament how to fix it, but they're simply telling Parliament, you must remedy this.
But it does look like these are simple things that Parliament should have been aware of. I mean, I wonder if this is an honest, weakness of Parliament, or is it maybe some political gerrymandering somewhere?
Well, I think, it's the failure of Parliament as a whole, and I think the majority party has to take responsibility for that, for failing to implement the remedial action that should have followed the ConCourt judgment in the Nkandla case. Parliament, there are other aspects of Parliament's failures. A number of cases that have gone to court in recent times, the secret ballot matter, the SASA debacle, the nuclear case, None of these matters should have gone to court. They should have been resolved politically in Parliament. But Parliament, once again, failed to hold the executive to account. They failed to say to the Minister of Social Development, you must abide by the ConCourt ruling. And that failure has resulted in the ongoing legal issues around the SASA matter. So, again, it's Parliament's failure that leads to this.
And that speaks directly to the role of the presiding officers in this case, Judge, very briefly.
Absolutely. I think, the Speaker of the National Assembly has to come under some scrutiny herself now as the accounting officer for this institution. She must be held directly responsible for this matter. And I think Parliament needs to look at whether the Speaker is fit to hold office.
Mr. Naidoo, thank you very much. And this story, of course, we're far from over dealing with this story. It's the 29th of December, and we're going towards the new year. I think we'll be picking up next year, early next year, just before Parliament opens. Zinga, back to you now.
Thanks, Manelisi Dubase, coming to us live there from Parliament on that breaking story about the Constitutional Court judgment.